We are in week 3 of our series, Necessary Sins. Now, when I say necessary sins, if you haven't been here before, let me clarify. These sins are not sins that I consider to be necessary. These are sins that often the world around us considers to be necessary. It's necessary to lie sometimes, they might say. It's necessary to get angry sometimes. It's necessary to talk about people sometimes. And it's sometimes necessary to engage a little lust. Because this week we are going to talk about lust. Sexual desire has become a powerful and all-pervasive feature of our society. More and more it's talked about. Lust is considered to be a necessary tool for advertisers to sell products because sex sells. That's right. And it does. I'm not disputing that. And the thing, of course, that sex is most effective at selling is itself. The pornography industry is just insane. It used to be that all we had to worry about was people picking up magazines or VHS tapes. Now, you have an incredible array, an almost infinite array of pornography available everywhere you go whenever you're connected by a phone or a tablet or a computer or a television. Or probably some microwaves by now. It truly does seem like we live in a society, like Ephesians 4 talks about, that has let themselves go in sexual obsession, addicted to every sort of perversion. That is why we are talking today about lust. And if you think this is an awkward conversation, an awkward message for you to sit and hear, think about me who's standing up here talking about it. I just want to point out, Lauren read for us, let themselves go in sexual obsession, addicted to every sort of perversion. That word perversion, that's the Message translation. In the NIV, like John was saying, that word is translated greed. So you can see the link between lust and greed is there in the Greek, and we'll look at that a little bit later on. But our message today is going to be centered around Jesus' teaching on lust, found in the Sermon on the Mount, where he talks about a lot of life stuff, and of course sex and sexuality has to be one of those. Matthew chapter 5, verse 27 to 30, he says, "You have heard it said, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you, anyone who looks on a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart." First thing I want to point out here, Jesus does not argue, dismiss, or otherwise get rid of the Old Testament law. The Old Testament law from Exodus 20, verse 14, the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not commit adultery. But I want to point out too, for a bit of fun, that the Bible is not anti-sex. That might be a relief for some of you to hear this. The Bible itself, and particularly the Old Testament, is very much pro-sex. Now, if we had a time, I would love to take you a trip through some Greek translations of the Bible. Because you see what happens, particularly in Song of Solomon, this epic love poem of lust and sexual desire of a husband for his wife. The English translators, they blushed a little bit. And they chose words that don't actually say what the Greek says. They deliberately chose words that were a little less erotic. And so if I could make you blush. But for an example, let's look at Proverbs 5 in the NIV. No, I think I took this from the Message. "May you rejoice in the wife of your youth, a loving doe, a graceful deer. May her breasts satisfy you always, and may you ever be ravished with her love." Good to hear, right? So the Bible is not negative or anti-sex, but it has its place. And it's very clear about that. Sex is designed to be done and had and enjoyed inside a covenant. A covenant. And we talk about covenant quite a lot. We talk about marriage being this covenant and this and that and whatever else. But it's hard to explain. It's hard to explain because there's no modern word that we can substitute for the word covenant. There's no modern word that works for that. There just is no other translation for it. It is an ancient school of thought, an ancient type of knowledge, and an ancient type of relationship. So what I want to do is compare and contrast the way relationships are often done in our society and the way the covenant relationship is structured. A covenant relationship is far more loving and intimate than a commercial relationship. And it's more binding and enduring than just an emotional relationship. My wife has a relationship with a guy, a coffee shop owner down the street. But I tell you what, their relationship is on rocky ground. Because he made her a coffee that she did not like. And I've never been able to go to that coffee shop again. We are forbidden. See, a commercial relationship is one in which you enter into it just so long as you get what you want from the vendor for as much as you're willing to pay. And when the product is no longer to your liking, to your satisfaction, you go to another coffee shop. Or you do like people I know do, go shopping in the shop in the high street, and then you go and buy it for a better price online, right? That's the commercial relationship. And that's a lot of the way people want to live their relationships as well. But a covenant relationship is different. It's the opposite. A covenant relationship says, I will adjust to you because I've made a promise. For no other reason but that I've made a promise, and the relationship is more important than my needs. My needs are less important than the sustenance of the relationship itself. So in a marriage, you have two people who are willing to sacrifice their feelings and everything else in order to make the marriage work. Now, I will add a disclaimer. There are a lot of marriages out there in which one person is up for that, and the other person, it's in a commercial kind of relationship. They're in for what they can get out of it. But a marriage can never be about what you get out of it, because it'll break. And if that's the case, if you're in a relationship where you have covenanted and the other person is living in a commercial type thing where they're in for what they can get out of it, then you're going to be exploited. And that's a terribly difficult situation. And it's not the way a marriage should be. But if you have both people in a true covenantal relationship, it says, I will adjust to you. And you get three things. In a true marriage, in a true covenantal relationship, you find a zone of safety. You're finally able to get rid of any facade that you carry. No masks that you wear. You can let your covenant partner aware of your insecurities. You can let them know about your fears, and you can finally stop spinning, stop marketing, and stop trying to upsell yourself. You can just finally be yourself. You can't do that ever in any other form of relationship. In a covenant relationship, you're committed to the other person in spite of your feelings. Deeper feelings then get to grow. And the other covenantal relationship in lots of people's lives is the having of children. Isn't it? How many of you are parents? Hands up if you're a parent, have been a parent, have experienced parenthood. Now, parents know that when in parenting, you don't get a lot back. You give, you get very little sleep, you give. Congratulations to Sam and Nicole as they welcome their new government. You give and you give and you give, you're right? You know how this is. And you will never get back all that you put into that relationship, all that you've invested. And even when your children act in anger or disrespect, when they take advantage of you, they say hurtful things or angry things, you still love them. There's this deeper, richer feeling because you're invested together. And if you treat your marriage like a covenant relationship, when you both invest in each other, then a completely deeper set of feelings grow. And finally, if you're in a covenantal relationship, you are free. Freer than you'll ever understand. Because you're no longer a slave to how you feel about the person. A slave to your feelings and emotions, these basic biochemical reactions that happen inside your brain. are no longer controlling your life because you've made a commitment. So it doesn't matter. Your feelings. No longer a slave to your biochemical reactions. So when two people live in a true covenantal relationship, instead of a consumer relationship, they find freedom. They develop deeper feelings and they can finally relax in a safety zone. And this is the kind of relationship that the Bible says, and ancient wisdom says, should be the foundation for sex. Sex is a good and excellent thing when it's a covenantal thing. And it's not good when it's a consumer thing. When people use sex outside of marriage, what are you saying? I love the feeling I get when I'm with this person. Sex makes me feel good about myself. It makes me feel adored and me feel loved. It makes me feel complete. I need it. And so someone go out and find someone, or somebody to be precise, who will meet that need. Sex becomes a consumer good. But when you're in a covenant, when you make yourself physically naked and vulnerable, it's a sign of what you've done with your whole life. It becomes a covenantal renewal ceremony, a commitment ceremony. It's like getting married all over again. Giving yourself over and over again. It is incredibly powerful, deepening, solidifying, nurturing, and life-giving. That's how it's designed to be. Psychologist John White writes this, I can't remember the title of his book, Eros Defiled. He writes this: the bodily exposure that arouses and accompanies sex can be profoundly symbolic, powerfully healing, if it's the concrete sign of what is happening in the whole relationship. So it only makes sense that sexual relations be confined to marriage. For mutual disclosure and tender acceptance is not the activity of a moment, but the fabric of a lifetime's weaving. So that's it. Bible writers say, psychologists say, Jesus says, you shouldn't do with your body what you're not willing to do with your whole life. So Jesus affirms that view. Do not commit adultery. Keep sex inside your marriage. But he goes on, but I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Let's talk about pornography. Does everyone know what I'm talking about when I say pornography? Do we need a dictionary? No. Funny that. If sex only has integrity in a covenantal relationship rather than a consumer one, then it's obvious that pornography is breaking that, yeah? Pornography is selfish. There's generally only one of you involved. It's about meeting the needs of the user. It's addicting. It creates in the brain the same chemicals that cocaine does. It's definitely addicting. And it encourages fantasies, losing sight of reality, as Ephesians 4 talks about. It is the exact opposite of everything the Bible says sex is supposed to be. And no, it's not just religious dogma. Let me give you 5 ways porn ruins relationships from psychologists writing for relevantmagazine.com. It teaches viewers to objectify their partner. And let me point out, whether you're inside a marriage or outside a marriage, pornography is still wrong, right? It's still a consumer good, yeah? So it teaches viewers to objectify their partner. It sets unrealistic standards for sex. It destroys trust. It leads to isolation, and it encourages more and more and more, and can lead to adultery in the flesh. Jesus is really, really strong on this, hey? Really strong, because he goes on. He goes on, doesn't he? If your right eye causes you to stumble, he says, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. He's not mucking around. Now, admittedly, the disciples didn't go straight away and begin to dismember themselves. So we're pretty sure Jesus is not speaking literally, although we're not absolutely sure. Pretty sure. So what's he trying to say? He's saying, what do you have to do? What lengths do you have to go to? Who do you have to see? Whatever it is, do it. Get it out of your life. Stop it. Lust, the idolatry of sexuality and love will destroy you. Learning to use it selfishly, making it a consumer god, getting addicted to it, looking to it to give you the kind of soul-mending affirmation and closure and consolation that only God can give you, it's just not going to work. Your whole body will be thrown into hell. I have a picture of hell. Would you like to see a picture of hell? Hell is that. Doesn't look so bad, does it? What do you think? You see, because when Jesus says hell, he says Gehenna. Or in the Greek, it's the Hinnom Valley. And that's it there. It is a place that isn't used like this now, but back then it was completely on fire, and it was on fire 24 hours a day. It was the place where you threw the rubbish and it was incinerated. So Jesus is referring to a place here, to a physical place, to Gehenna. Why? Why? You see, if we can understand hell, we can understand what God is saying about sex and sexuality and what hell is. Jesus could have used lots of different words for hell, but he did. He used this word, Gehenna. Gehenna is the idea of a place of unquenchable thirst and pain, a place of unfulfilled longing. If you were just visiting this place, you weren't actually on fire, but you were visiting, you would be struggling to breathe. You would run out of moisture in your body very quickly. It's like standing very close to a furnace for an extended period of time. It was not a pleasant place. They would be thrown into hell. It's a place of unquenchable thirst, unfulfilled longing. We were built to go God. Human beings are built to be in relationship with God, and therefore, if we lose God, lose sight of reality, as Ephesians 4 talks about it, as well as God, then the ability to have our deepest needs satisfied, we're going to lose as well. Hell means when you lose God. It means when you end up in a place of unfulfilled and unfulfillable longing, of deep, deep, unquenchable thirst. Jesus says this lust points to that. Lust holds out this promise of consolation, of quenched thirst. It holds this promise of closure and affirmation, but lust destroys our ability to be ourselves and steals our freedom. It's like the man on the raft in the middle of the ocean, dying of thirst, water everywhere, not a drop to drink. It just doesn't work. Our lust-soaked culture is evidence that people are desperately thirsty. People have a longing for a soul filled with life and love. People are living in hell on earth because they are desperately thirsty, desperately hurt. My favorite stories from the Bible is this: the encounter that Jesus has with the Samaritan woman at the well. You might know this story, but Jesus meets this woman at a well in Samaria. And he offers her living water. Water that will quench her thirst forever. And she says, well, give me some then, I'll have that. That'll save me having to come down to this well and get more water every day. That'd be great. And Jesus then says something really odd. He tells her to go and get her husband. Does that strike anyone as odd? If you know the story, he asks her for water and she says, have you got nothing to draw with? And he says, well, if I had, I'd give you living water if you knew, and da-da-da. She says, well, give it to me. And he says, well, go get your husband and come back. Do you ever think that's an odd, like, why not just tell her right there and then? Do you think? I always thought that was an odd statement. But he is highlighting her deep, unquenchable thirst. Go get your husband. Jesus knew she was thirsty. She'd had 5 husbands and was now living with another man. She was thirsty for love, acceptance, affirmation. She was a wounded person. Most people, we live in a broken world, and most people are wounded from the rough edges of that broken world. Some are gouged pretty deeply, some are hurt pretty severely. Wounded by circumstances, wounded by people, wounded by loss and grief. This woman is just like most people. She's hurt, she's wounded. Those wounds and hurts are like little bushfires in her lives. And she tries to quench them with relationship with man after man after man. Jesus offers living water. I'm not going to stand here and ask you to put your hands up if you struggle with lust. I'm not going to ask if you're addicted to pornography. I'm not going to ask if you treat your relationships like a commercial transaction, or whether or not you truly live in covenant with your partner. I'm not going to ask those questions, but I want you to ask them of yourself. And I want you to ask yourself the question, why? I mean, the statistics, I promised myself I wouldn't do statistics, because every time someone gets up to talk about lust, they talk about the statistics. But the statistics are really clear. ChristianityToday.com, you can go look it up. They have a whole section on sexuality, and you can have a look, and there's article after article after article of Christians' involvement in pornography. You can go to relevantmagazine.com, you can go to xxchurch.com, and you'll find the same statistical discussion. Suffice it to say, just because you're in church, just because you're married, just because you claim to be a follower of Jesus doesn't make you immune, doesn't make you off the list of the statistics that say. No age group falls outside this list. Pornography is everywhere. Lust is everywhere. Lust is the problem. So I'm not going to ask you which side of the statistical analysis you fall on. But I want to ask you, what are the wounds, the hurts? What are the ways in which you've been abused or damaged or disrespected or been used inappropriately in a relationship? What are the ways in which you're hurt? What are the ways in which you need God to heal? Well, you need to know the presence of Jesus. Later on in the story, Jesus is talking to her, and actually she leaves because the other disciples come back and they think it's awkward to see Jesus talking to a woman. And she doesn't go back and get a husband, she goes back to get everybody. And she says, come and let me introduce you to a man who knows everything about me. Does Jesus know everything about you? Well, he does. But have you opened yourself up to that? Things from decades ago, when you were a kid, things your parents said mistakenly, or things your parents did, things other people did. What ways have you been hurt? What ways do you need to surrender to the presence of Jesus? We're going to sing a song, and we're going to have a time of prayer. And I'm going to say, if you want to come and to kneel before God and to know His presence in this way, to just know His presence. I mean, we don't know what else Jesus said to her, but we know that she told and admitted to Jesus the truth of who she was. And she found healing in Jesus' presence. Let's sing this song. The place is open for prayer, but I want you to think. I want you to be honest with yourself, with God. You might as well, He knows. And ask. Heal the wounds. Quench my thirst. Allow me to truly live in covenantal relationships with another, to give and to offer love, open and freely. Let's sing, I surrender.